Welcome, everyone. We are here with Dr. Amit Goswami, who I have been wanting to meet for months and months, if not a couple of years, because I've been absolutely mesmerized by his books and his work and his thinking. And so we're super excited to have the opportunity to spend some time with him today to talk about his books and his work. So thanks for being here, Amit.
I'm delighted.
So before we get started, for those who are new to your work, I'm just going to read a little bit of background about you. Dr. Amit Goswami is a theoretical nuclear physicist. He's also a teacher, a lecturer, a researcher, and a retired professor of physics from the University of Oregon, where he taught for 32 years. He's a renowned pioneer of the new paradigm of quantum science. In 2009, he founded the quantum activist movement, and then 10 years later, in 2019, they established an extension of this movement at the University of Technology in Jaipur, India, which I love. I love Jaipur, by the way. He has developed an international program of education in quantum science of health, prosperity, and happiness, and we'll touch upon that today, actually. And he was featured in What the Bleep Do You Know, for those of you old enough to remember the movie. I do. And then, of course, the documentaries, The Dalai Lama Renaissance and The Quantum Activists. Amit has written many groundbreaking books on quantum science and consciousness, including The Self-Aware Universe, The Quantum Brain, which I couldn't put down, The Quantum Doctor, The Physics of the Soul, the Everything Answer book, right? Another really great one that's very evergreen. God is Not Dead. I mean, what a great title is that? That's an excellent title. And then his latest book, which he co-authored with Valentina Onosor, which is Quantum Integrative Medicine. And we'll touch upon that today, too. So thanks again for being here and welcome.
Thank you.
I know, that's quite a bio. It's quite a bio. So I would love to rewind the clock, as I often do, and turn back to what prompted your love of physics. What was the impetus to go down this path?
Yeah, that's a good question to answer. What prompted my love of physics? Because it is it happened a long time ago, of course, when I was just about 14 years old. That was the time when I had to choose, just beginning of high school, right? So I had a choice between going to medical school, prepare for that kind of thing, biology basis, or pure research. So somehow it just happened that I was not so keen on handling biology lab. So, but physics lab seemed more interesting, and also physics as theory. So I was drawn to physics and eventually became a theoretical physicist rather than laboratory physicist.
Right. And then you went on to teach. You came to the United States to teach as well, which I'm sure was a great opportunity for your career at the time.
Yes, and that was the right time also, because it was the early 60s, and the Sputnik has just gone up and the American space program in deep competition. So there were huge amount of excitement about physics, and I was in the middle of that. So I'm very grateful because, doing research in a field which is avant-garde and creating a lot of noise, it's always exciting for a young person. And I had a wonderful advisor, so that worked out beautifully.
Beautiful. Well, I love your work, and I love the direction that it took you in. So we'll move into that direction as we progress here. I'd like to ask a question about In Physics of the Soul, the book. You speak about the monad, which has been really merging in spiritual circles lately. You keep hearing more and more about the monad. And you say the monad is not an entity. It is not a thing made of energy. It is the context around which the energy and information of a life are processed by consciousness. Can you expand upon that in a way that is meaningful for people?
It is always going to be a little bit hard to grasp because, something that is not an entity is very hard. But truly, there are things like that. For example, our collective unconscious. That's not an entity. I mean, it's a sort of a, we have now analogy in the computer, in internet, what we call iCloud, that kind of thing. So it's something that is there, but it's not in space and time like iCloud. It's outside of space and time. So similarly, our personal non-local memory, collective unconscious is humankind's non-local memory. And we all can access it, not in any kind of volitional way, but it comes to us if we work a little creatively. The human personal unconscious, non-local memory, the trick is that it's non-local, it's outside of space and time. But we have also this personal memory, that's quantum monad. Not collective unconscious, but a sort of personal unconscious in which are recorded things that are my past character traits and habit patterns.
Would that be similar to what people in spiritual circles call the Akash or the Akash?
Yeah, they call it karma. What people call karma is nothing but our habit patterns. The things that we learn, that's our karma. People have sometimes a little bit wrong impression. Karma is used only for tit for tat kind of thing. I do something to you, you are going to do that back to me.
Cause and effect.
Yeah, cause and effect. But that's not the right meaning. The right meaning is that during the process of living, we learn a lot of things, and they become patterns of habit. And some of them are so deep, they become part of character. I'm sure you will identify me, part of my character is being a theoretician. That's a character. I look at everything with theory kind of way, immediately philosophize. What is the meaning of this? That's my main question, not how can I verify this? But instead, what is the nature of reality? So that's a character. You may have, right now you're interviewing, you're a very good interviewer. That may even be part of your character, that you're very good in how to draw people out into saying something, communication. So these are the traits that get transferred from one life to another, and in between two lives, one incarnation, then another incarnation, in between that, it is stored non-locally outside of space and time, and that's what we call quantum monad, that existence.
Mm-hmm. And it's almost like an always-on database that we can access if we're operating, I guess, in the quantum field.
Yeah, it's a pretty available, accessible database. Usually, what happens, my own experience is that I could be classified as what they call today talented and gifted. And I found that like at age 3, as soon as I learned to speak, I could, within a few months, I could read whole books and I could do math at a high level that I could help my father teach his students. So that was pretty interesting. And in that respect, I identify that as I was automatically drawing from my past life learning. This part, I didn't have to make any attempt. So I assumed that that's part of my character trait. I learned it so deep that I don't have to even access it, a habit trigger. Other character traits, though, are not character traits. Other habit patterns, though, have to be triggered. How are they triggered? Like you have a necessity. You have a friend, and you need to know how to talk with this friend. You are rich and she is poor. How do you initiate this poor-rich relationship? There's a sympathetic character. So that person's presence and that question that how do I have good things in my heart, I'd like to make friends, but how do I do it? In those moments, we find that, we are doing it so automatically because we already have learned how to do it. how to be nice to someone.
So this almost makes it seem like we talk about things like soul families, right? Where we reincarnate with some of the same energies or souls or people. And sometimes they show up at pivotal times for us to learn something from each other. In the case of the poor friend and the rich friend, or the friend with cancer and the friend who's healthy, or whatever it happens to be. Do you believe in that and those synergistic relationships that pop up?
I think those are the triggers. You can call it synchronicity. But lots of these things happen and we learn so rapidly in those moments. That's the thing to notice. That children, they're sometimes so obtuse to learn things, have to be taught, like you have to really rote learning, commit to memory, that kind of thing. Whereas other things they learn so quickly. How? So this mystery is solved by saying that the stimulus is eliciting that particular part of karma that the person already has, a triggering of that particular ability.
And is that a way for us to become more proficient in that skill?
That's the whole idea of reincarnation. We have reincarnation because many things are so difficult to learn that, sometimes we have to spend a lifetime doing it. And then we lose it. That's ridiculous. Because then everybody would be so ignorant. I mean, it would be hunters and gatherers forever. But that hasn't happened. How do we build civilization? People assume that we build civilization because we write down a lot of things and we read other teachers and so forth. But that's not enough. It's still not enough because there's just so much. But it is a fact that civilization also means that there's so many things in the past that we know today, and the capacity to know, that capacity, where does that come from? Of course, today people are just not learning things that way. That's a different story. People are getting dumbed down because of internet and information processing. But when I was growing up, it really was amazing to compare even 2 generations back. And it really is true that we were doing things which were not possible for people even 2 generations back. Like I would compare things with old people, and they wouldn't know how I'm processing things. But this is very easily explained because of my reincarnational abilities, that I had that ability and they didn't. I got it from reincarnation, not from my own environment. And the environment just cannot teach that fast.
It actually makes me think of 2 things. One is the accumulative individual consciousness, right? That awareness that keeps expanding lifetime to lifetime. And then the collective consciousness that, right, that also happens lifetime to lifetime.
That also happens. Indeed, a good example of collective consciousness is for creative people, they inherit the concept of hero's journey. This is one of Jung's discovery, Joseph Campbell's discovery, that it is already codified in the collective unconscious. So any one of us who wants to join hero's journey, we have much more easy way to do it rather than if we had to do it from scratch. The steps are known, what we have to go through is kind of known. So reincarnational memories of that kind, it facilitates our learning in this life much easier than if it was not there.
Well, and tapping into the power of the collective consciousness, which we all have access to.
We should have access to, but what happens to people is that it does take some creativity to get the access. So unfortunately, some people, because of very base level conditioning, like, we are all a bit me-centered selfishness that comes from our concern about security, lower needs. And then we have negative emotional brain circuits. We have pleasure attachment, and now also attachment to information processing. These things are huge hindrances. So if we can overcome those hindrances and can be creative, inquisitive, intuitive, then it's very easy.
Yeah. I think part of it too is just like you said, allowing. I think when we have so much conditioning and we have so many triggers around things like self-worth, right? That's a big one. When you have self-worth issues, you kind of self-sabotage your success before you even get there because, you want to be loved. And, if you're a superhero or a star amongst your family when everyone else isn't, you become ostracized. And, there's nothing worse than being thrown out of the tribe.
Yeah. Right now, we are in the middle of discovering that we have not only just the self at the brain, but we really have three selves, one at the navel, one at the heart, and one at the brain. The one at the heart is not so unfamiliar. Women like yourself, you already know that, the heart has much to say to our behavior. But the navel, it gives us self-esteem. And women generally, one of the reasons that has happened because of men's domination over women, men for ages have kept women kind of locked up in their heart, a little bit of the brain, that's all. But they have not allowed women to be autonomous. Women always have to depend on men to get around in the world.
Yeah.
To some extent, even today, that remains true because physically, the woman is much more vulnerable. So, even as an American woman living in a very advanced technological society, you wouldn't dare to go to Central Park to work at 1 o'clock in the morning.
Right. So true.
It's too dangerous. Whereas a man might not think that way. So, in that way, the navel, we call it chakra in yoga psychology. Navel chakra, that's where the
solar plexus
self-esteem is. It's never awakened in women. But it should awaken between age 5 and 7. Erik Erikson, the great psychologist, discovered that it is really something that is already available to boys at 5 to 7, but parents usually do not want to give their little girls autonomy at 5 to 7.
Hopefully that changes.
That is already rapidly changing.
Yeah. The new generation of parents will hopefully realize the detriment.
But we have to create a safe environment for little girls to have that complete freedom to choose, to be autonomous.
Yeah. So, it's funny because in the work that we do, when we do spiritual healing too, we find exactly what you say, that in a lot of women or more dominant feminine energy individuals, that the solar plexus is blocked and also the throat, right, as well, for not being able to speak their truth. Yeah.
Throat chakra is very much involved with unless we have that self-worth, self-esteem, our throat chakra does not awaken either.
Yeah, I actually did have a question in here about the chakra system. Can you tell us the relationship between them and the brain?
Yes, the brain also has a chakra. Actually, these two chakras, maybe even one in the midbrain, we suspect. So brain has its own chakras, but the body has 4 chakras. They're very major. Navel and heart, you already have mentioned, but body also has the sexual organs around that sex chakra, and at the root of our body, at the bottom, at the tip of the anus, we have root chakra. So we have 4 chakras in the body. And these chakras majority of human beings are still not very familiar with. Women are generally familiar with the heart. Some men generally are familiar with feelings in the gut. So there is some familiarity with that for men. But like root chakra, sex chakra, why don't people show much awareness of those? Because the brain controls all the chakras. Even the heart and the navel, the brain controls it. And because the brain controls it and our access to those chakras are really through the brain, we do not really feel, unless you have those awakenings, we don't really feel the energies in our chakras. We could, because we have selves there to feel. But generally, people just use the self chakra, the brow, which is the ego, usual ego that we call it. Right behind the brow chakra is the prefrontal cortex, which is the location of our conditioned ego. So that's what people generally experiencing when they experience anything or when they talk. So many people are very feeling deprived, emotion deprived.
Yeah. Yeah, I couldn't agree more, actually. Yeah, it's interesting because I've lived all over the world. And when I went east, when I say east, I mean North American east, right? Through to Europe, I found that emotions were suppressed more.
Yeah.
And then I went further west and, California, Hawaii, whatever, expression is very open.
Yeah. In fact, if you go to the south, any south, like even Southern Europe, even South of America, like if you go to Mexico, if you go to South America, then it's a very different world. It's a very emotional world.
Yeah. Yeah. Italy, right? Italy, the Mediterranean, South America, the Caribbean. Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. So let's pivot just a little bit. In the Everything Answer book, which explores how quantum science explains love, death, and the meaning of life, you explain potentialities, and I love this. So you write, and this is great, you write, without the Big Bang and potentiality, there would be no galaxies or first-generation stars in potentiality. There would be no supernovae or second-generation stars in potentiality. There would be no planet like Earth or no living cell in potentiality. So this chain of potentialities is essential to produce the actual event of collapse that produced life. And then in a video on your website, you say, in quantum physics, objects are not determined things. They are potentialities or possibilities for consciousness to choose from. So can you explain this in ways that are relevant for people and also to people who are open to understanding these possibilities and how they can choose them more proactively in their life?
Yeah, we are not usually scientific, but almost everybody is bound to pick up ideas of science. And generally the ideas that pick up is Newtonian science. Yeah. And in that science, there is only objects, and especially objects of matter, material objects. So how do we picture it? We picture it as a hard billiard ball or a grain of sand or a marble. That's our picture of a solid body, matter. Matter, of course, also exists in gaseous form and liquid form, and that's not so solid, that can move, and that's a little bit subtle. But people usually think of it as solid, rigid, that's reality. And this is a huge problem because, of course, human experience is not like that. We have thoughts which has no solidity like that. It's more subtle than even gas. We cannot smell it. We cannot do anything of the kind that we can do with physical stuff. Then we have feelings. Feelings are even more mysterious because at least with the brain, we are in touch with, we think regularly, but many people don't even emote. So they don't know anything about feelings. This causes a huge problem. So even for our scientists, even today, after 100 years, almost 100 years of quantum physics, even today, people really do not get into the essence of quantum physics because it is obscure to them. It requires consciousness to understand quantum physics. Because quantum physics is something very strange, and this is what you're hitting at when you say potentiality. Quantum physics really says that objects are potentialities. They are not concrete, they're not solid, rigid, like we are describing Newtonian objects. But how do you reconcile it? How do you reconcile the fact that, whenever we observe the objects, they become that solid, rigid, that kind of thing, elementary particle. But when you are not observing, quantum physics is adamant that there's no other way to look at them except as waves of possibility. So where are these waves? Where are these potentialities? People who know a little bit about psychology, for them it is easy, because Freud gave us the answer. Our thoughts do not come directly from manifest reality. They are unconscious first, and then they become conscious. That's the way. So these objects of potentiality, quantum objects as wave, they reside where? They reside in a domain outside of space and time, like unconscious. We call it domain of potentiality. And then when we see them, measure them, then they become actuality, then they become particle-like. If we take this view, then everything becomes very clear. And not only it becomes clear, we ask the question, so how is the possibility becoming actuality? And answer has to be that we are choosing. We are choosing among the possible facets, the facet that I want to experience. So two things here. There is no solid, rigid world, manifest world without first our measurement, our observation, our choice. Until we observe, until we take part, until consciousness is actually active, there is no manifest world. So now you see the world. How was the world created? There is Big Bang 13.7 billion years ago, right? And then galaxies, and then stars, second generation stars, and then all these things. There must have been all potentiality until that beginning of life on Earth or other planets similar to Earth. Until these planets appear and life appeared, that potentiality appeared. None of those previous potentialities can manifest. So all of that is lying in potentiality. And so when the first single cell creature is created on Earth, then the whole bunch of potentiality becomes manifest, going backward in time. First, going backward in time, all the way back to that 13.7 billion years ago when the Big Bang is manifest. It's a little bit hard for people to comprehend, but the quantum physics insists this idea that choice is not just this moment. Choice can also be a delayed choice. I choose now and collapse all the things that are connected to that event of right now in the past. That past was not necessarily collapsed before. Just because it exists as a possibility does not mean that it has become actuality without the participation of something to experience it. This is the concept people have very hard time believing, that we are necessary.
When you talk about delayed choice, though, and then you also say it goes backwards, but then in the quantum world, there is no backward forward, there just is, to confuse things even more. When you say delayed choice, that's where I'm confused.
Yes. So think of an actual situation. You know about near-death experience, right?
Yeah.
That's a very good case of delayed choice. So imagine somebody has died, right? And then they are having experiences that they report when they
return.
Recovered, right? When they're restored. So how does that happen? This is the question that you have to ask, how that could happen. Because it is also true that without the material body, nothing can manifest. This is the other aspect of quantum physics. We can think, but thought cannot manifest without the brain. We can feel, but feeling cannot manifest without we can have potentiality of feeling, potentiality of thinking, but to manifest it, we need a physical body. This is the thing. This is where even the spiritual traditions, which had the idea of consciousness already, even they could not comprehend this part. That consciousness cannot manifest without the human being. without a living being, without that single living soul. There is no manifest world that includes consciousness. So consciousness exists what? In potentiality. Itself exists in potentiality. All of this is potentiality.
It can be a cell. It doesn't have to be a physical human being.
Until the physical potentiality is ready, collapse cannot happen. When the physical potentialities are ready and the mental, imagine that we have physical potentiality, mental potentiality, feeling potentiality, intuitive potentiality. All of these are part of the world of potentiality, in which there is also a consciousness potentiality, subject potentiality. And then this collapse of the potentialities into actuality takes place. This is where the concept of downward causation. But it happens how? It's a circularity. The presence of the observer is doing it, but there was no observer before collapse. So collapse is creating in a circular way. The observer creates the collapse, collapse creates the observer. So as soon as the observer is ready in potentiality, then collapse is automatic. Observer looks and reality can collapse. Collapse as what? That oneness of consciousness that splits up into a self and an object that the self experiences. That self we experience in connection with the brain or the single-celled creature. That's how the world manifests. Now, if you with this knowledge go to look at near death, you will get the idea of delayed choice. Because what is happening? Brain is dead. So no experience can happen. But does that mean that potentialities cannot happen? No. So potentialities can still happen. So the dead person, in a way, now it's just monad, habit patterns and stuff that goes out, so to speak, of the body, becomes independent. The mind and the thinking and the feelings become independent of the sensing part because there is no body to sense, brain to sense. And how could such a being have experiences? There is still the collective unconscious.
Yeah.
There is still non-local communication with other beings, manifest beings available. For example, a person who is on the surgeon's table undergoing surgery, that person has other beings around the table of the surgery, like the surgeon, the nurses. So they can, with the help of these people, they can experience. Let's say that's the kind of experience where people are found to hover in their operation room, and they can describe what the surgeon was doing during the operation, something special things. It's uncanny.
That's the non-local consciousness.
It's non-local experience.
Information that we have access to.
It's still a choice because the patient's own self is not manifest yet. How does that manifest? So when the surgeon starts recovering the brain comes back gradually. Brain is not at once alive. The brain comes back to life in a gradual way. The first things that come back to the brain is memory-making capacity. As soon as that capacity is ready, then the person can use that brain memory in potentiality. It's still potentiality because until the full brain is restored, there's not going to be any collapse. But now the person can use even the brain personal memory to think, to feel, etc. And all that is still in unconscious and possibility. But as soon as the surgeon revives the brain is alive again, and the possibilities can collapse, immediately, not only the possibilities at the present moment collapses, like the person wakes up and sees the surgeon, not only that collapses, but all those things that is connected to that moment of revival, all those things that the person experienced during the sort of semi-death, because it's not really death, it's going to come back. So all that events is going to show up in reverse order. in the order that it happened. So how are they collapsed? That collapse going backward in time. Like usually, the person would say, first of all, this hovering over his own operation. Then second of all, they would see things like their relatives. They would see things like a spiritual teacher. They would see things like eventually light.
Yeah,
Clear
light.
that's telling them to go back.
Right.
That telling them to go back is crucial. That's the last event. So that one is so it will collapse exactly in that order. So that one, but that without that one, there would be no collapse because the person would just be dead. But that going back is a very significant thing that happens in the person. That's the person's own creation that, yes, I have to go back because I'm revived. I have the body now. I can go back.
Or often, like you do hear, some people will say they meet up with guides through the tunnel, through the light, whatever. They meet up with guides who say, it's not your time yet, go back. And other times you hear people say that their own soul or their perception of their soul is saying, you're not ready, you've got to go back, there's work to do.
Yeah, that's the thing. We have to recognize that a soul without the body cannot perceive. This is something, again, very quantum. In quantum physics, there is just no collapse of event without the physical body. So we have to give up the idea that there are experiences, souls can have experience. This is why when I was talking about monad, I was so careful. Because monad cannot experience. Monad does not have a physical body. But if the monad gets a physical body, for example, a channeler, if the channeler is correlated, this is a quantum concept also. Suppose I knew the entity. Suppose somebody that you knew has died. Okay? Then you knew that entity, you loved that entity, and that correlation with him still remains. And then this person dies and his monad is there. Can we communicate with that monad? Channeling is a phenomenon that does happen, very good evidence for it. How? Because the monad is representing the channeled entity's character. And all of a sudden, if I am communicating with it, then it will replace my character and become that character. So what happens is the channeler temporarily becomes somebody else. I have seen this so many times, so many channelers I have talked to, and they all have this characteristic. When they're channeling, they're different.
Yeah.
And now with scientific measurements, we have verified that. More spectacular verification, this beautiful experiment. My friend Gilda Mura and Norman Don, both of them are my friends. I met them, very good people. They did this experiment. For a channeler, they measured the regular brainwave, and his brainwaves are always beta. Thinking person, ordinary person, beta waves, 13.5 hertz to about 30 hertz is the range of the frequency, brain frequency. Mm. But when the same channeler channels a medical doctor, then brainwaves become over 40 hertz, gamma, not beta. Now, this is such a striking thing because, 40 hertz requires extreme concentration. Yeah. Like, it really requires a neurosurgeon to have that kind of concentration. And I get it once in a while, so I guess a quantum physicist is allowed too, but I don't get it all the time, only when I'm deeply into that theorizing. And brain scientists likewise get it only when is really directly dealing with a brain surgery.
So if the channeler is accessing someone who requires a monad that requires that level of concentration, it can take it on.
Yeah, so this is the direct proof because this person possibly could not have that kind of habit pattern available to him, and yet he is borrowing it from this monadic entity. There I go. I call it entity, but it's not an entity, monad. Just
an
monad.
Energy. It's an energy.
It's a sort of a pattern. It's not even energy because, it's a pattern of karma. It's a karmic pattern. It's very hard to give it a label because it's just that. It's just our habits, our learning, the capacity. So it's not a thing. It's the capacity for doing things.
Well, could you call it a frequency?
Can we talk about frequency of the monad? No. We cannot talk in terms of frequencies. No. This frequency talk is not a very useful way of talking. The brain really vibrates. I mean, on the brain, different regions of the brain are electrical systems. They really do have this vibration. So we can talk about the brain in terms of frequencies. But rest of the body, it is not electrical necessarily. So there is an electromagnetic skin of the physical body. Outside of the skin, we have electromagnetic sort of an aura that surrounds us. So there you can again talk about frequencies a bit.
Are we not all frequencies in a way?
We should not talk about ourselves as frequencies. Much easier to talk about in terms of we are a being that has the capacity of physical, vital, mental, and intuitive experiences, and also a self that experiences the experiencer. That's what we are. We should not think of we are energies, because that's only part of us. The vital energy part is energy-like, because the energy that we feel, Indians call it prana, people call it also life energy, vital energy.
Yeah.
That energy is really like one energy. It's a pure quantum energy. And there we could talk about frequency that would make some sense, but we found that it's not quite right, because as soon as it's a frequency, people get the idea that frequency is higher and higher frequency, and higher and higher frequencies have higher and higher energies. That doesn't hold for these frequencies. For example, the frequencies that we have at the navel chakra, these frequencies enable you only self-worth. You cannot say that as you go higher up, we get more self-worth. No, it's not like that. It qualitatively changes. The feeling here is other love, not self-love. Yeah. Feeling here is curiosity. So the entire characteristic of the feeling changes. So much better to talk about is that we have the vital energies, the characteristics of the vital energy described by the organ function at the chakra. Like here we have the organ heart, and that's where love happens. We have also organ immune system. That's where our defensiveness is. When we give up the defensiveness, we can love. Quite simple to understand. Here we have security, navel chakra. We have the feeling of security. Security makes us kind of me-centered, etc. Mm-hmm. But when we are me-centered, we are not very brave. We are not very outgoing. So what we need to awaken the navel chakra to get that self-worth. When I feel that I am worth it, then I can help another. I can share my power. I can also venture into creativity and so forth. Mm-hmm. So all these chakras, there are two things that we have to know. First of all, there's a conditioned aspect of the chakra, which gives rise to conditioned physiology of the organ there, connected to that. If I awaken that chakra, that means that the organ will be functioning at a higher physiology, like a caterpillar becoming a butterfly. Same genes, but the physiology changes. The vital energies change. And that is crucial. So in that way, it's really a radical change, not a gradual increase of frequency.
So this is a good segue into a question that I had about how it works in a quantum way. So in your book, The Quantum Brain, I love how you use a really great example of our bodily organs interacting in a Newtonian way versus a quantum way. You say in a Newtonian way, the organs remain separate as they interact, but in the quantum way, the local interaction actualizes the unity of the two organs via consciousness, right? Is like a mediation. when that unity happens, which you call a quantum dance, the music they create becomes harmonious, which made me think of heart coherence, right?
Yeah, exactly. That heart coherence is the key. When the heart becomes coherent, it becomes quantum. As it becomes quantum, it can connect to consciousness in a creative way. And that energy is what we call love. That energy, the moment that the heart becomes coherent, is when heart becomes quantum, is when heart connects to consciousness in a new way. And that new way of connecting is the energy that we feel as love. If you notice carefully, when you are loving someone, in the act of loving someone, you notice that the consciousness will tend to have an expansion. You feel like heart is expanding, literally. So that's the consciousness localized versus consciousness expanding. When it's localized, it's very defensive because the immune system is always trying to defend us. So it's very defensive. It's very me-centered. Defensive. You are foreign. I am mine. It's defensive. But when that love happens, then you are included. And that's the expansion. My consciousness literally expands to include you in myself.
I love that as a physicist, you talk about love because that's core to our teachings. Everything we do is really just teaching. Are you plugging into fear or are you plugging into love? That's kind of, everything that we talk to people about. So,
and again, notice the quality, how the energy is not the energy, the frequency of the energy, but the quality of the energy. The energy of fear is the losing the energy from the root chakra. Very different energy. Whereas the energy in the heart, when you lose the energy of the heart, you feel jealousy. That's a very different energy. Jealousy is not at all like fear energy.
Yeah, fear feels to me like very contracting inward.
Very contracting, exactly. Jealousy also contracts, but in a different way.
Yeah, it expands us to understanding that oneness that we all share with each other.
It can. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you wrote that, most of us perceive love as critical to our well-being, yet traditional science, right, has not offered us an understanding of why we have these issues. And I don't mean romantic love here, although obviously that's part of it, but I just mean love for another or seeing another in ourselves. Can you talk to people about how we can get into that heart place so that we can show up more unified in our approach to everything that we do and how we interact with others?
Of course, getting into that love, it's possible in two ways. One way is already built into our collective unconscious. Collective unconscious, our ancestors did a lot of work and they were connected. So when they created their memories, the memories are not just personal unconscious, it's collective unconscious. So all humanity have access to what they did. Of course, that access is the creative access. So we don't always get that access until we join the creativity process, all that. So they did make some love circuits, and we can access that. And little girls in our usual cultures, they do learn other love very early on because that is the culture. Culture is that boys suppress emotions, they have to be men, whereas girls, they're serving their little brother, they're serving their father, they're also helping mother out with housework. Girls are taught that. So how do girls learn this other love, expand beyond their own self? They're taking advantage of, it's almost instinctual. It's called altruism. If the other needs me, I will be available. So that altruistic love is what they're using. So that's one way we can learn. We have some altruistic energies that we can build on to get other love, and that is not so hard. And most people have it, almost like an instinct. Mm-hmm. But then there's unconditional love, and that's even beyond the romantic love. So the caterpillar becomes butterfly. That's the romantic love. Caterpillar is just capable of defense. Butterfly is the first leap, quantum leap. Then you can romance. You can love a partner. sexuality is very important in romantic love. But then love without sexuality, love in anybody without any return, which mystics talk about, unconditional love, we say in modern times. Mystics call it agape, compassion, this kind of words are used there. But that's another, we have to become a super butterfly, another transition of, another quantum leap of the heart. But it can be done. It can be done. I myself have experienced a bit of that. So it really can be done. And it's very different. When that happens, you really look at everyone as a potential love object, love partner. I should not have used the word object, love partner. And that's an amazing experience. Before, you have to sort of, how do we have relationships? So we have relationship on the basis of liking. You have vital energies, I have vital energies. If our vital energies resonate, then we say, okay, we like each other, we'll be friends, right? That's still very local. It's not non-local.
Well, and it's conditional also.
Fairly conditioned. Also, civilization is there. We have to be civilized. But often people are, because of their altruistic energies, because of their positive, most people are not living that. The brain is very negative, but most people outgrow that brain. Our growing up is, we become nice. Let me just put it that way. About 15% of the people in the world are nice people. Rest of it, 85%, dubious. Sometimes nice, but that's a put on, so they become non-nice very quickly. But there are genuine nice people. I mean, actually, be frank, right? I mean, the people that you meet, the people that I meet, generally they're nice. I mean, we don't meet those 85% very often. So this is the thing. So non-locality is not that foreign to this 15%. And whenever we are feeling an expansion of the heart, there is non-locality. We are really including the other. People are genuinely good to each other. So what are they doing? They're borrowing the non-local love from the collective unconscious. And then there is real quantum leap that gives a real ability. That's different because this is just friendship. Yes, I can be nice to you. I can be really good to you. I feel great. Right now we are borrowing from collective unconscious a kind of nicety to each other. This is all very genuine. There is a non-local part. There is a local part as well. But this unconditional love is even more special than that. What really happens is that if there is a need, if someone, some stranger, really is the case that they are put together with this savant who has unconditional love awakened within himself, then that love is automatic. You cannot not love. There's a story about this. There's a sage who lives, a celibate sage who lives by himself, a wise man of the village, Zen master. And then it just so happened that somebody left a little girl in this Zen master's door. So who will take the girl in? Zen master takes the girl in. And the villagers are all very surprised. You are a celibate, you know nothing about taking care of babies or taking care of worldly stuff. How will you take care of this kid? So the sage just says, well, whoever gave me the baby will also help me how to bring up the kid. It's not going to be any problem because I love this girl. How can I refuse? So that's the when anybody in need becomes a family.
Yeah, it makes total sense, right? Because it's an awareness, as every great sage and mage will say, right? It's awareness that you're seeing God, if you like, or, unity, collective consciousness, the cosmic soup, whatever you want to call God for you, you're seeing that in another human being and you merge and you become one. That's how they describe it.
Yeah. momentarily we intuit God some of the time. That the oceanic experience that happens, a few times a month, maybe a few times a day, even not that uncommon. But to have it in a regular way, that requires, years and years of meditation, years and years of creative work. There's a book out called Altered Traits by Daniel Goleman and Richard Davidson. In this book, they studied people who do long-term meditation with compassion as their focus. And when they examined their brain, then they found that the brain is very different. Earlier I said that the ego is located in the prefrontal cortex, not for these people. For these people, there is an ego, but that's not there much of the time. They are indeed all distributed all over the brain. Before we're talking about this heart coherence, they could be called having coherent brain.
Oh, interesting.
Different parts of the brain really start dancing in synchrony, like they're in a chorus line. It's amazing.
Wow. That's very cool. It's a great image to have, right? Mm-hmm. I can see that because the whole idea of quantum working together in unison, it's not these disparate pieces.
Yeah. So this is what, we wrote a book called, Valentina and I wrote a book called Quantum Brain. This is what we found, that if we can convert the Newtonian brain, put that at bay, of course we need to have that too. When we go to the bathroom, we don't need quantum brain. We need Newtonian brain. But if we can have the quantum brain, occasionally our life becomes so alive, so different, so creative, so loving, so happy.
Yeah, I even wonder what it would be like to have the quantum brain when we cook, right? Because I live with an Italian and we're always cooking, and I'm thinking we eat great food, we create great food, but maybe we could create superfood, right? If we tapped into the quantum brain.
Yeah, and also then you have to think of somebody having access to quantum brain very often. I had this experience, and then you go in their proximity, and your brain starts becoming quantum. I'm not joking. Literally, I went to live with a guy named Franklin Merrill-Wolf. I lived with him for a month. So initially, at that time, I was struggling. A lot of unhappiness was there. And so I go to this guy, and in 7 days, I started hearing comments about a quantum physicist who is delightful. Initially, I didn't get it, but I didn't get it. I was so obtuse. I really thought that there is another quantum physicist who is visiting the ashram. So I kept asking people, where is this other quantum physicist? I would like to meet him. And people said, what? Then it dawned on me, they're talking about me. I had become delightful. But
I believe that we become who we spend our time with. It's
exactly.
Energy exchange.
Exactly.
It totally makes sense.
So one of the problem today is that we are not growing such people, or if they're growing, they're not coming to interact with people anymore. We need these people around, whose proximity will make a little difference in other people.
Yeah. So let's talk about God for a minute, because you have a whole book with a name, actually, just one book, I guess, but you say it's subjective and it's scientific, which is so brilliant about your work in general, right? And so you say you can call it God if you want, and I always add GODDE for the feminine, but you don't have to. Quantum consciousness will do. And so you talk about non-locality, which we've talked about a bit already, the tangled hierarchy and discontinuity, these signatures of quantum consciousness that have been independently verified by leading researchers worldwide. So if God is quantum consciousness, let's put it a different way. How do we talk about God in scientific terms in a way that can bridge the gap between science and spirituality that the materialists have been so set on keeping separate for so long?
There is something very special that is built into the quantum science of consciousness-based science. When we do all this, there is this unconscious with possibility, and then the possibility of a subject, that this brain or a living cell that comes about, and immediately there will be a collapse of the web possibilities into actuality. Actuality will be a self, a conscious self, manifest self, and then the object. So this is really the basic quantum theory of consciousness. So the key is that what is the cause of that collapse? If you ask about that cause, then we get, so this cause, if we assume that there must be a cause for everything, so there should be an entity that causes. It's a concept.
Yeah.
Cause does not really require an entity. Cause can come about just like that. The situation is there and something happened. Because of the totality, the holistic nature of the situation. That's one way of thinking, very, very abstract way of thinking. The other way of thinking is that, let's just be very simple. Somebody is causing it. And that cause is called, the religious traditions in Christianity is called downward causation. So it's as if an entity, God, sitting up there, presiding over this domain of potentiality, and that presiding officer is what collapses. So it's a simplified description of the process. Oneness and then collapse. If we put a cause to that oneness collapse process, that cause can be thought of as God. Quantum physics only gives us possibility. God makes the possibilities into actual events of experience in the human being.
I see.
But notice that the possibility did not collapse without the existence of the human being. So spiritual traditions always have noticed that there is no God without the human being. There's a famous saint named Meister Eckhart. He used to preach like that. He would give a lecture that God, I need you, no doubt about it, but you also need me. He'd say, if I am not there to pray to you, you have no value. So he would put it that way, but in quantum physics, it's literally true. Therefore, one way of thinking is that we are co-creating the universe. God and me are co-creating the universe.
Yeah, there you go. That makes a lot more sense, right? And that we are all co-creators in every moment, right? And the old traditional way, particularly in Christianity, right, in the West, and the Judaic, Abrahamic religions, right? It's all about God is a separate entity or energy. And if we don't do the right thing, then we receive the repercussions.
Yeah, that circularity has to be understood. Without that circularity, we get into paradoxes. So clear thinking requires that we understand completely that, yes, we can think of an entity, but we must think of it as a circularity. I am causing that entity is causing me, that kind of way. Yeah. Then no more confusion. But even if people can think of downward causation, even without this co-creation part, even that a progress, then thinking of God as a human being, super duper, sitting on a throne in some star in outer space. This is the way that ordinary people think about it in many countries, even now. Yeah. So that view has to go away, because that view is extremely non-scientific.
Yeah. Well, not only is it non-scientific, it's not helpful.
It's not helpful, because then we think, how can I get favor from God? So people pray to God, God, give me this, but nobody else.
Yeah. We are God. God is us. There is really no separation, right? The non-duality of who we are. So last question before we talk a little bit about, some of the programs that you do, and that's manifestation, which is really a great segue from what we were just talking about, right? We hear all the time from spiritual teachers said in slightly different ways that we create our own reality, we create our own outcome, but they don't always understand how to get there. And those old enough to know, Esther and Jerry Hicks, where they talked about the vortex, right? They always talked about it, or at least the channel of Abraham talked about it as this vortex energy. You can't create manifestation unless you're in that vortex. And really that vortex is the quantum field. So can you expand upon that in a way that kind of gives meaning to people and that they can implement in a way that makes sense?
We just had this segue to this segment. It's beautiful when we agreed that yes, co-creation is a better idea. So normally people miss the idea of quantum manifestation because they're thinking that I manifest. My thinking of something, my meditating on something, my desire on something, all it needs is patience and I just wait and then it will come. Wrong, because I'm only a co-creator. So God has to cooperate. So God and I co-create whatever manifests. To get co-creation, how I think must be in agreement with how God thinks. My purpose must be in tune with God's purpose. So if we do these things, indeed things manifest. This is what the modern creativity theory, quantum theory of creativity is teaching us. We have to intend, but we have to intend with greater good in mind. We have to intend in such a way that it is also God's intention. It is also God's purpose. In other words, we intend about things about which God cares, namely the divine values, love, beauty, justice, truth, just this kind of thing. Then we succeed. But if we are desiring for a motor car, then there's no reason to go non-local means. Then it's much better to save up some money and then go to a dealer and buy a car. It's not going to work that, oh, give me a Cadillac, God. And, people used to do that in the 60s. Never worked, but we could convince them that it's not going to work either.
Well, I think when you're doing it for the greater good. So, I mean, an example could be, I'm struggling where I live because I have to pay all these bills and I've got to do all the things. I can't do the work that I need to do to serve humanity. So let the divine universe create more abundance for me in my life and my living situation, so I have more time to go out and serve others.
Yeah, exactly. That is the kind of thing. That is the kind of thing. So when we struggle about, let's say, pray for peace, these things are value. Pray for peace, pray for love in the world, health, well-being. Am I excluded if everybody had well-being on the earth? This is the thing we miss. I'm not excluded. I'm part of everybody. So we are not missing anything. But what we cannot shed from our wanting, desiring, is that only I want, but nobody else. And that is what stops us in getting what we want. If we can release that thing, that no, everybody can get it, it's okay, I'm also getting it, I'm not being deprived of it, then we can get, because these things are not zero-sum game. It's not that if I get, somebody else is not going to get it, and if somebody else gets it, I'm not going to get it. It's not that game. These archetypes are infinite, so anybody can get any amount. I can love you all that is needed, and there'll still be love for everybody to get every amount that they need.
I mean, you're essentially talking about the scarcity mindset versus the abundance mindset.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, and just knowing that there's enough for everyone, for all of us, and beyond. It's unlimited, right?
Yeah.
So, and you're also doing programs, right? You've created master's and PhD programs in the quantum science of health, prosperity, and happiness. Can you tell us about those?
We are very much of the thinking that, what is needed maximally is education. And the professions have to bring much more of non-local efficacy than is prevalent now. So initially we thought it would be just psychology and medicine, but then we included even prosperity because I wrote a book on quantum economics. While I wrote that book, it became clear to me that even business people really should open up. And even in our collective unconscious, it's very clear, if you read Jung's version of it, it's very clear that the archetype of power or abundance should be always dealt with, explored with the archetype of love or goodness. The combination is necessary. Otherwise, you never find satisfaction. You never find that I have enough, that abundance. You never get that. You always have this poor mindset. I'm still poor when I compare to a person who is richer than me. That does not go away until we have this archetype of love brought into the picture. So this is the point of the whole thing, that a healer who cannot empathize non-locally with his or her patient, they're not serving what is possible in terms of healing. They are doing some healing. We respect all healers. But if they could have this non-local ability of knowing directly how the patient is suffering, where exactly the pain is, then the healing becomes so much more profound and so much better. So this is our attempt of contributing to the world in the sense of really putting some transformed professionals out there. And the transformation that we have seen, you will be amazed. Really, you should come to one of our 10-day workshops that we have in India every year. And you will see how we teach and how much transformation the students acquire. In just a matter of a couple of years of masters, and for PhD, we require 3.5 to 4 to 5 years. And how much transformation they pick up in that time. It's an amazing amount.
Well, maybe we can do something, a part B on that, because I'm definitely interested in exploring that. Is there anything else that you would like to share with others who are listening and viewing this? Anything else?
Well, just that invitation to these things, my general advice to people is that love is the very basic thing to transform with. Or if you talk about manifesting, manifest love in your life. That will make life so much simpler, happier, healthier. Quality of life will go up so much. It's just an amazing experience to have love. And come to our programs. If you have problems with separateness, loneliness, all these things, check out our website. It's amitgoswami.org, amitgoswami.org. Come to the website and you will see all these programs, master's, PhD, certification programs, and even experts to help you with problems, consultation experts. So we are very much interested in serving people any which way I can. Both Valentina and I take service extremely seriously, and our purpose of life basically today is to make a difference in terms of how the world is today.
Beautiful. I can feel that just from spending time with you, and I'm sure that others can feel that resonance as well, for sure. So, wow, what an honor to have this time with you, Amit. And we will be putting links up on the subsequent pages so people can find out more about your work and your books and your programs. So, thank you so much.
Thank you.